Hey guys, Jay here, and this is the 1610 bookshelf speaker from Arendal, and this is part of their new series of loudspeakers, and I can't help but feel like that this is probably the highest value Arendal speaker to date from having lived with them for the last few months. Also, mind you, this is a pretty big loudspeaker, but it is also the second smallest outside of the slim 1610s, the smallest speaker you can get in the 1610 series as well as the 1528 series combined. To put it more into perspective, I have this chart here that shows the general size differences between these bookshelf monitor loudspeakers. And to clarify, I am not saying that bigger speakers are naturally better, but what I'm trying to show here is that for this price, I feel like it's the best price you can get on a speaker that gets to the extra large size bookshelves, right? So the Kefari 3 Metas as well as the Concerto, Bocard S400 Mark II, these are kind of the speakers that I would describe as a regular bookshelf speaker. And then there's these. Right, there's the big boys. That's the TAD ME1, that's the Focal Diablo, the extra large, big bookshelf speakers in the high-end market. And here, we're getting that for a fraction of the price. And in some cases, even bigger than those higher-end loudspeakers right off the bat. And again, this is not to say that size equals performance. That's not the goal here. I'm just trying to provide context as to how big these loudspeakers are. Because while it's not as big as the 1528 bookshelf speaker that I reviewed, this, the 1610 bookshelf speakers, is still a extra large bookshelf speakers as you can see here. And again, they're not using HDF or some other cheap cabinet material to come to this size. They're actually using one of the most premium materials in the high-end audio world, which is HDF, which once again performs better than MDF but costs more. And actually, in calculating the internal volumes of each speaker, we also have to account for the wall thickness for each brand because they all use different wall thicknesses, and that obviously impacts the internal volume calculations. However, in this case, Arendal has one of the thickest walls regardless of the price point, and as an example, the front baffle here is nearly 2 inches thick. Oh yeah, it's a thick boy. And how they make this 2-inch front baffle is not just a 2-inch thick baffle that they just kind of cut out, but it's thin layers of HDF that's been painstakingly glued on top of each other to make it 2 inches thick, and with the sole purpose of making this curve here happen. And this curve essentially is the time alignment for the drivers. So the drivers are physically time aligned so that they remain phase coherent and the most coherent at a certain distance away. And in this case, as you saw with my tower review of the 1610 series, that distance is about 4 meters away. However, I did find that with the 1610 series, personally for me, I didn't find it as critical as the 1528 series in keeping that distance for the best sound result. In fact, just 2 meters away was pretty optimal, and I didn't see a big difference from 2 meter and 4 meter distances. So I think it's pretty safe to say that these are less sensitive versus the 1528 series in keeping that rule of distance for this time alignment and taking advantage of that fully. Now, if you want to learn more about the technology behind Arendal 1610 series, then you can watch my tower review, which was a very lengthy review. So prepare for that. Get some coffee or something, right? But once again, we have the aluminum magnesium tweeter, which is not as good as the lithium magnesium tweeter on the 1528 series, like the one on the 1528 bookshelf speaker that I love so much, but still very good tweeter. And especially on this speaker, the 1610 bookshelf speaker, I find that this tweeter is very, very good. So it's not bright or fatiguing whatsoever. It's quite neutral, but has really nice sparkle, and it's really hard to tell from the lithium magnesium tweeter on the 1528 bookshelf speaker versus the aluminum magnesium tweeter on this speaker. So the towers, I could tell a lot more, but on the 1610 bookshelf, I can tell a lot less. The tweeter here, integration, and the sound that's coming out of this speaker is just fantastic. So the tweeter, I think, is highly refined, beautiful sounding, sweet, and I would say maybe 90% as great as the lithium magnesium tweeter that I experienced with the 1528 bookshelf speaker, but only with the 1610 bookshelf speaker. The tower is a little bit of a different story, so go watch that review if you're interested. When it comes to the mid-range driver, same thing, we're going to get that carbon woofer that we got on the towers, and it's going to have that really nice density in the mid-range, just the right density, not too thick, not too thin. And what I really love about this mid-range driver is that it is actually a very good integration with this tweeter. It marries very well in terms of that density and neutrality. And once again, almost textbook neutrality, but there is a sense of, great decay, attack and decay structure, and just a very, very coherent and amazing sound that I would have expected to get from a dual concentric driver. And what that means for those that don't know, dual concentric drivers are drivers that have a mid-woofer and the tweeter in the middle of it, right? So this tweeter in the middle of it. But because the phase alignment here is so great and the tweeter is as close as possible to the woofer thanks to this, contraption here, right? This very nice thing that's holding the waveguide and all that kind of stuff. This allows this to work almost as a dual concentric driver in the sense that it's so phase coherent, just like one. And then we have the 8-inch aluminum driver here, and these are incredible. I actually took one of these out in my video of the towers to show you the magnet, and it's just incredible. And that goes the same for the mid-range as well. It's very, very nice, thick magnets and motor structure. So very high quality drivers in here overall, and you definitely feel the bass with this one. I mean, the size adjusted as well, but man, this speaker has impact, dynamics, warmth, and it's just the right amount. It's not lifeless and stripped away, but it's very accurate, at the same time neutral, full-bodied, great density to the sound. And of course, we get the grill here that just snaps on like that. So very elegant, very nice solution. But yeah, with neutral speakers in the past, when I got neutral speakers, like we're talking Revel, we're talking, Paralisten, we're talking some big names here, but mostly when I heard neutral loudspeakers, what I kind of expected was kind of this type of sound, right? Where it's so transparent to the source, it's transparent overall, but not so stripped away of its kind of, musicality, that density. Right? I really don't like speakers that's neutral, that measures well, but it's lifeless and thin sounding at the expense of ultimate transparency and detail. Maybe that's your thing, but personally for me, that is just not it. That's just not enjoyable sound for me. I really like this one because it keeps things neutral and transparent, but the meaning of transparency is a little bit different with this one because technically this speaker is neutral, and try to follow me here. This speaker is neutral, but it can easily be warm or even bright. And that is the hallmark of what transparency means for this speaker as far as I'm concerned. Because this speaker, right, where you put some warm gear like the Live Gone monoblocks, it becomes rich, warm, and really nice density in the mid-range, and the treble is just rolled off nicely so that it doesn't feel any kind of fatigue or brightness or forwardness, and you kind of lose a little bit of that sparkle and everything becomes a little bit warm and luscious, and kind of reminds me of Sonos Faber even, right? And then you plug this in to something like the SMSL Gone amp or even the Burson monoblocks, and then it becomes really transparent, more brighter but sparkly, transparent, clarity out the wazoo. Still not fatiguing, but definitely opens up and is sparkly. It's like the definition of what I would imagine for a brighter, more livelier, detailed type of speaker to sound like. It's not fatiguing because the tweeter is very refined and integrated very well to the speaker, but still you get this really nice sound and a portrayal of what a great, brighter speaker should sound like, more detailed-oriented speaker should sound like. So I really love, all the different profiles and, sound that you can get out of this speaker with gear. It's almost like an empty canvas. And it scales phenomenally well because when I plug in my MTRS, for example, man, the dynamics, the crazy amount of refinement and mid-range dynamics and bottom end from the speaker man, it sounds like a tower. And straight up just demolishes a lot of towers I listened to in the past. So that's how great this loudspeaker can get and scale with some really nice gear out there. And straight up, this is gonna be one of my favorite loudspeakers of all time and definitely makes it onto my list because people have questions, right? People have questions whether I like this speaker better than the Kef R3 or, all these other speakers, the Concerto, Paralisten, Dynaudio, some Dynaudio models, a lot of questions about which comparisons to do. But my main thing with this speaker is that I personally love it more than those speakers. And that mainly comes from the fact that this is an extra large loudspeaker and can put out incredible bass outputs. And not just any bass outputs, but really high quality bass outputs that punches and extends at the same time. Very clean with nice decay structure, just like the towers. And it's just so enjoyable to listen to. And I can cater the sound depending on my system very well with this. And I love switching out DACs and trying and reviewing different DACs with the speaker because the layering differences and the little minute differences in the tuning of the DAC and the sound profile. Man, anyone that says that you can't hear differences with DACs need to try it with this speaker because that's the transparency of this loudspeaker in the sense that it's so transparent to whatever you plug in it that it just kind of portrays the best of what your gear has to provide. So that's what the real beauty of the speaker is. And that's why I personally really, really love it. But another reason that I really love it compared to all those other speakers is because even though this is an extra large loudspeaker, man, it throws a soundstage that's so wide and deep and holographic that, it's simply a larger and a deeper soundstage than I can get with some Kef speakers or even the 1528 bookshelf speaker. So even though the soundstage is pretty enormous with the 1528 bookshelf speaker, maybe because this is a slightly more compact, loudspeaker, the soundstage is actually a little bit more grand with this one. Now there is an expense to that, right? And that's the bottom, weight and heft is not as great as the 1610 towers or the 1528 bookshelf speaker for that matter. But man, you can certainly add some subwoofers to this bad boy to get that a little bit more extension and you're in for a real treat. And that's what I personally did was I added two Arendal 1723 1S subwoofers. These are sealed subwoofers and the reason I stacked them, which is a question that I get asked a lot in the comment section why I have them stacked, is because there's a ceiling room node, which means there's dips in the bass response because of the room size and dimensions. And usually when you have an 8-foot or 10-foot ceiling based on the height of your ceiling, there's a room node that happens because of that distance from the floor to the ceiling. And by stacking the subwoofer like this, you can mitigate this. And this is measurable. I measured it in my room and stuff like that to make sure that it works in my room. But this is one of the solutions to kind of combat that and why you stack a subwoofer. So yeah, I've tried both. I've tried left and right position and then stacked it on the left side and then stacked it on the right side. And then I kind of settled on the left position in my room, which worked the best for me. And I think a lot of people like tower speakers, but they also like the idea of buying a less expensive bookshelf speaker that's a huge bargain and then getting two subwoofers to augment that lower bass. And that's a great way of doing it that allows you flexibility and where you can place your subwoofers like I did to get the best results. And it requires more work, but at the end of the day, you can get better results sometimes depending on your room. Now in this case, you're getting very close to the price point of the 1610 towers when you add two sealed subwoofers like this. The price difference then becomes about $400. And if you're asking me which one I would pick, I would personally pick the towers, even without subwoofers, because it's a bottom ported, tuning on the towers. The bass dispersion is much, much more grand and disperses nicely into the room. Like I said, a pool of nice decay that really pressurizes your room more than even this speaker. And it's not the same thing as adding two subwoofers, even though it is well integrated in your room. It's not gonna have the same amount of kind of scale as the bigger tower speakers do. And the tower speakers are going to be able to play louder if you're in a bigger room as well. And also, you don't get that dynamic mid-range punch and that crispiness in the guitar attack and decay, like I explained in the tower speakers. So the mid-range still has that dynamic capability, but it's not as dynamic as the towers. So it's a bit of a trade-off, right? So this speaker, out of all the Arendal speakers that I've heard, has the largest and deepest sound stage and has the most kind of nuanced and transparent to the source type of sound, and just a really nice, pleasant speaker to listen to. Overall, the tonality is one of my favorites when it comes to the Arendal speakers. I think this is the actually, cheapest or least expensive, but certainly the most tonally, for me, enjoyable loudspeaker, even compared to the 1610 towers. However, the 1610 towers bring things to the table that this speaker certainly doesn't, and that's the overall dynamics and that mid-range kind of the guitar and dynamics, micro dynamics and macro dynamics that happen in the mid-range. That is just crazy on the towers. So you lose some, you gain some, but again, the towers do have a wide and deep sound stage, just not as much as this speaker. So there's a lot to love about both designs, but when it comes to maximum sound stage and imagery and stuff like that you're looking for, with the most amount of flexibility to the setup, I definitely recommend this loudspeaker because I had the most easiest success getting the best sound out of these right off the bat without any trouble. And I think another curious thing that people are asking is, how does it compare to the 1723 THX loudspeakers? Those are tower speakers from the 1723 line. So it's not part of a 1610 or the 1528 line, but it was one of the very first speakers I reviewed from Arendal, and it knocked my socks off because of the dynamics. But the main kind of criticism I had with that speaker, if you look back, is that the soundstage was pretty limited, but thankfully, because it was higher sensitivity than these loudspeakers, I can run it with tube amplifiers to open up that soundstage a little bit more. And this speaker straight up demolishes the 1723 THX. Like, I just don't know why it's even being sold anymore. And I say that because the bottom heft that this bookshelf speaker gives is, to me, equivalent to what a 1723 THX loudspeaker would give. And of course, we have the tweeter and mid-range driver that's much higher quality than what we get with the 1723. And the soundstage is larger. I mean, in almost every way possible, except for the fact that the 1723s are tower speakers, so they can get louder with higher sensitivity, so it can use less power to do so. Outside of that advantage, overall sound quality-wise, this just takes the cake. And it's not like you can't enhance the soundstage of these speakers either, right? You can even enhance it even further by adding a tube preamplifier, which is what I recommend to do always, because that's just best of both worlds. If you can't have a tube amplifier, having a tube preamplifier with a nice high-powered, high-current amplifier with this, just absolutely glorious soundstage, holographic, three-dimensional, and great layering. And because of the inherent design of the speaker, you get something very special, and that's that even though the soundstage gets enormous, things are very pinpoint accurate, and it throws a large soundstage with really nice focus and separation of the instruments that just comes across like you're in this big hall. Like, this speaker sounds so much bigger than even its size suggests. So yeah, if I just close my eyes, they're basically towers. Now, another thing that I like about this speaker is, despite the fact that this is the cheapest of the lineup outside of the center channel and the slim, you still get the same quality parts that you do in the towers and in this entire lineup, and you get the nice crossover parts, which uses only air coil inductors and high quality parts in the mid-range and tweeter circuit. And also the binding post is going to be the same high quality, pure copper, pure solid copper, just rhodium plated for longevity. And just like the front baffle design, they go a little bit extra, and they make sure that there's no ferrous magnet materials in the signal path. So everything is just pure signal path, no steel nuts, no steel washers, no magnetic materials. So that's something that they do to avoid smearing of the sound. And I think that does I don't know, like I think it does something because when I listen to it, it has again that very coherent imaging and sound staging that is just to die for. Like this is equivalent to some of the horn speakers I've heard in terms of that sound staging and not so much the imaging, because with horn speakers you don't really get imaging sometimes, but this speaker is like, the sound stage it throws reminds me of some really nicely designed horn speakers even. And again, all while providing dynamics from equivalent to a very large tower speaker. So that is very impressive. You get dynamics and soundstage like this in one speaker. That is a rarity for me. And I said the same thing with the tower speakers, but it's even more true with this speaker, which makes it, again, really high value in my books. Like this is the epitome, like this is the height of what a true value luxury speaker looks like in my books. It's not cheaping out on any parts. It's using high quality drivers, high cabinet material, high quality crossover material, high quality binding posts, like high quality everything, and the size and the sound tuning, engineering, everything is just very high quality and put together and doesn't really ring value. And yes, the price point is, $3,600, but I mean, for that kind of money, I feel like you're getting a speaker that is very similar to some of the top level speakers out there, right? Even just the dynamics alone is even more dynamic than the Focal Diablo from my experience of reviewing that speaker, and even more dynamic with great heft and even better authority and density in that mid-range and thickness and warmth and body to the sound than the KEF Reference 1 loudspeakers. Again, I'm not necessarily saying that this outright beats those really high-end speakers, but I am trying to say that for a fraction of the price, this is able to hold its own when compared side by side, just due to the sheer size and the engineering going on here. There's no excuse that this performs less or more poorly. And I fully realize that what I'm saying right now may sound hyperbolic, overhyping, or just too good to be true if you don't understand the Arendal's business model. The reason they can do this for a fraction of the price is because they don't go through distribution and dealer, and they go direct to consumer. So they have the direct to consumer business model with the 60-day in-home trial so that you can try it in your home risk-free. And so they're obviously confident because they're giving you 2 months to decide if you want to keep it or return it at their expense. But again, the reason that this speaker is the price it is because of that business model. And really, the speaker is competing right up there with like 10,000, 15,000, maybe a little stretching it there, but $15,000 speakers if it does go through distribution and dealership model properly. Now, with that being said, in terms of the actual performance and based on my experience and my biases and what I like, I mean, this speaker is right up there with like $20,000 speakers, like the Wilson Audio Sabrinas. Now, once again, maybe not as much heft as the Wilson Audio Sabrinas, but in terms of mid-range and treble quality, and I even said this on the 1723 THX loudspeaker review, the tweeter and the mid-range presentation on that speaker, to me, was even better than the Wilson Audio Sabrina loudspeakers. But with these, I mean, it's just straight up better than even the 1723 THX. So it's another level up. So honestly speaking, I think that this speaker is straight up right up there and can compete easily with $20,000 speakers when it comes to mid-range and treble presence, and even maybe bass heft as well when it's not a tower, right? When it's a tower like the Wilson Audio Sabrinas, yeah, it's gonna have more heft, especially in a larger room. And on that note, let's check out my reference recommendation list. And on each price category, I'm supposed to have 2 speakers, no more, just 2 per section is a rule that I set for myself. Otherwise, it's gonna be filled, right? So it's a pretty strict rule that I set for myself. And in this price category, thankfully, we have just the 1723 THX loudspeakers here. And that's been the speaker that's been on that list for the last 3 years. The value king, right? In that price category, like the sweet child, like sweet child. What the heck am I saying? But you get the point. These, I can just easily add it onto the list, and I will for now. But I might just remove the 1723 THX loudspeakers from the list entirely, finally, after 3 years, because like I said, This speaker to me is just better in almost every way. Unless you decide to go to a bigger room, then you should be looking at the 1610 towers or even the 1723 THX tower speakers because they're more sensitive if you have lower powered amplifiers. But yeah, very similarly, just like the towers, these aren't the most hard to drive loudspeakers, but they're gonna like power. If you give them power, they're gonna like it. So I highly recommend you give them good power, because the last thing you want to do is underpower these speakers, because what happens with Arendal speakers when you underpower them, well, you get this sloppy kind of bass and not very coherent type of sound, and that's a key sign that you're underpowering them. Just because you get the volume up doesn't mean that you're driving them properly. I already used this metaphor before in my tower review, but you could power it with 1000 watt, class D car audio amplifiers or PA amplifiers, right? Really cheap ones out there. There's 1000 watts. Easily you can find one. But will that sound good? It'll get loud, but will it sound good? Probably not. You're probably not driving them properly. But put some really good quality amplification behind it and it will highly reward you. Like I said, the speaker, because of its high quality design and high quality drivers and crossover, it's going to scale the more you give. The minimum, if you're truly on the budget, the minimum I would give these speakers is the SMSL GON amps. And those are about $400 something, so that's pretty good. I would get at minimum 2 of them to power these, running them as monoblocks. My review for the SMSL should be coming soon, so you can go watch that video if you don't understand what I'm saying here. But basically, you can get 1 to use as a stereo amplifier or get 2 to use them as monoblocks for more power with these. So that's why I recommend 2 of them, minimum 2 for these speakers. But yeah, many options. Just give the best power that you can for the money and the budget that you have, and these will heavily reward you for that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for my video. I hope this video was helpful, and if it was, let me know in the comment section, and let me know if you have any questions in the comment section as well, and I'll be happy to answer them. All I ask is that you click that like button and subscribe for more videos just like this, and I'll see you guys on the next one.